In July 2025, the world stands at a critical juncture in its ongoing battle with the climate crisis. The evidence is no longer abstract or distant. It's immediate, visible, and, for millions, deeply personal. Across continents, the signs of a planet under duress are unmistakable. In the United States, cities like Pittsburgh have faced an onslaught of extreme weather, with a staggering 112 flash flood warnings issued by mid-July alone. This isn't an isolated incident, but part of a broader, deeply troubling pattern. Scientific consensus now points with certainty to the intensification of the water cycle due to climate change, driving heavier rainfall and making devastating floods a recurring reality for urban and rural communities alike. But the crisis is not confined to America's heartland. Globally, the climate emergency is manifesting in diverse and destructive forms. In Athens, a rapidly spreading wildfire threatened the historic Penteli Observatory, underscoring the unpredictability and ferocity of climate-induced disasters. Cities like Dallas, Lisbon, Sydney, and Cape Town are likewise grappling with the dual threats of wildfires and floods, each disaster leaving behind not just physical destruction, but also a lingering sense of vulnerability and uncertainty. The rhythm of the seasons has shifted. What once were rare, extreme events have become alarmingly common. In this context, the question arises, is nature taking revenge? While it can be tempting to frame these disasters as acts of retaliation by a wounded planet, the reality is more complex and ultimately more sobering. Nature operates under immutable physical laws responding to the inputs and disturbances imposed upon it. The intensifying storms, floods, and wildfires are not acts of vengeance, but the inevitable consequences of human choices. Decades of greenhouse gas emissions have pushed Earth systems beyond their historical norms, amplifying the natural forces that have always shaped our world. What we are witnessing is not nature's revenge, but nature's response, a mirror reflecting back to humanity the impact of its actions. Yet, July 2025 marked more than just another season of climate calamity. It was also a watershed moment in the global legal and moral reckoning with climate change. On July 23rd, the International Court of Justice issued a landmark advisory opinion that reverberated across governments, courtrooms, and communities worldwide. In a clear and unequivocal statement, the court affirmed that all nations, regardless of their wealth, power, or treaty status, have a legal obligation under international law to combat human-caused greenhouse gas emissions. The court went further, declaring that a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is not just a goal or aspiration, but a fundamental human right. This advisory opinion represents a turning point, not just for legal scholars and policymakers, but for the billions whose lives are shaped by the climate crisis. For the first time, an international legal body has clarified that inaction on climate change is not merely irresponsible. It may constitute a violation of international law, a breach of the duty owed to present and future generations. The court's message was direct. Failure to act is not just a matter of politics or economics, but of justice. Perhaps most significant was the court's emphasis on the responsibilities of wealthy nations. The advisory opinion underscored that countries with the greatest historical emissions and the most resources bear a heightened duty to lead in emissions reductions. These nations, it said, cannot evade responsibility, and their failure to meet obligations could open the door to reparations or compensation for countries suffering the gravest consequences of climate change. This bold pronouncement has already begun to reshape legal strategies, emboldening advocates to pursue new court cases and demand accountability from governments and corporations alike. The International Court of Justice's opinion comes at a time when the world is desperate for both leadership and solidarity. In response, major powers are beginning to signal renewed commitment, even amid geopolitical tensions. The European Union and China are preparing a joint declaration on climate change, set to be unveiled during an upcoming summit in Beijing. Though it won't introduce new targets, the declaration is a reaffirmation of the shared resolve to address the crisis, emphasizing that climate action transcends other disputes. This global consensus, fragile as it may be, is an essential foundation for the coordinated efforts now urgently needed. For families in Pittsburgh whose homes have flooded multiple times in a single month, for firefighters in Athens risking their lives to protect cultural treasures from encroaching flames, the headlines and court rulings must translate into tangible change. The path forward, charted by science and now reinforced by law, demands rapid reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, sweeping investments in clean energy and resilient infrastructure, and a renewed commitment to protect the most vulnerable. It also calls for a fundamental reimagining of the relationship between humanity and the natural world. The notion that nature is taking revenge gives agency to the planet. But in truth, it is human agency that has brought us to this moment. The choices made today, how we generate energy, how we build our cities, how we value forests and oceans, will determine whether the coming decades are defined by escalating disasters or by renewal and adaptation. The events of July 2025 serve as both a warning and a call to action. The floods, wildfires, and heat waves are not isolated tragedies, but interconnected symptoms of a deeper systemic crisis. The International Court of Justice has made it clear. The era of voluntary piecemeal efforts is over. The responsibilities are now legal, the rights are now universal, and the consequences of inaction are now inescapable. In the end, nature is not our adversary, but our context. The laws of physics and ecology cannot be bargained with, only respected. As the world absorbs the lessons of this pivotal month, the imperative is clear: to act decisively, collectively, and with justice at the forefront. The future remains unwritten. But in the clarity of crisis, the path to a more sustainable, equitable world has never been more urgent or more possible. Subscribe for more factual deep dive explainer videos.